The M14, a rifle caught in the flux. The M14 is arguably the best main battle rifle ever created. Many GIs who used the thing in the 1950s and 60s felt it was the finest rifle that the U.S. Army ever fielded. So why did it have such a short service life of only 11 years? Well, technically the rifle was only the main rifle for the Army and Marine Corps for 11 years, but it actually has also one of the longest service lives because it is still in use today in special operations. The Navy also held onto the rifle because of its heavy caliber because it was excellent for detonating mines that they found in the open ocean. The rifle with its long range also proved to be better on the high seas at long ranges than the standard issue M16. The M14 was an offshoot of the famous M1 Garand rifle. The lineage between the two is obvious. Unlike the M1 Garand, of course, it's fed from a box magazine. The rifle can still be fed with a stripper clip. In this way, the rifle harkens back to the days of old while still being a harbinger of the future. The real reason the M14 was replaced in military service had to do with research from battle that was done in the Second World War and later in Korea. The main combat rifle back then was the M1 Garand, a rifle which excelled at ranges in excess of 700 yards. As a result, the M14 was given the same capability. However, lengthy studies done after the war found out that almost all of the encounters with small arms took place at less than 300 yards. The Army determined that a smaller, lighter caliber and a rifle that could be fired more accurately at closer ranges more quickly would allow for a more effective infantry force. Eventually, the Army settled on the M16. Its 5.56 millimeter round was much smaller than the standard M14's 7.62 by 51 millimeter cartridge. This allowed soldiers to carry more ammunition for the same weight and allowed them to have a more accurate, higher volume of fire up close, where most of the small arms battles take place, at least in theory. The Army found it was easier to train people to shoot a lower recoil rifle at ranges of 300 yards and less than it was to shoot a higher recoil rifle like the M14 for ranges out to 500 and 600 yards, where realistically they probably would never have to make a shot. However, following the Vietnam War, it was determined that despite the high rate of fire and relatively close range accuracy of the M16, soldiers were still missing their targets. This higher rate of fire did not equate to a higher hit count on the enemy. In fact, quite the opposite. The Army determined that in the Second World War, they fired approximately 25,000 rounds of ammunition for every enemy soldier they killed. In the Vietnam War, it was closer to 250,000 rounds of ammunition discharged for every enemy soldier killed. Thus the old phrase, spray and pray. The Army, unlike the United States Marine Corps, had de-emphasized marksmanship and had gone to a theory of volume of fire. This eventually, to some degree, has also been adopted by the Marine Corps, although they still put an emphasis on longer-range marksmanship. With a military that planned to simply kill the enemy by putting a lot of lead downrange, the M14 was not the rifle that they were going to use. It only had a 20-round magazine, and it could not carry as much ammunition. Additionally, the M14 is over 3 pounds heavier than the M16, and since the rifle spends most of its time in your hands for the few moments that you're actually shooting it, weight is a very big deal for the infantry. After the M16 was debugged, it became an excellent rifle, but during the changeover period, there were a lot of very unhappy soldiers who wanted their M14s back. By the same token, there were many soldiers who much preferred the lighter, more handy M16 to the big, heavy M14. The M14 had a short service life of only 11 years as America's main combat rifle, not because of any defect with the rifle. In fact, many people think it was still the finest rifle the U.S. Army ever fielded. In fact, the rifle's still in production today. It was simply a rifle that was considered anachronistic for the modern battlefield. However, given the long ranges of desert warfare that's being fought these days, the M14 has seen a resurgence in popularity. The M14 was retained as a sniping rifle, and given the long ranges and open desert warfare the U.S. Army frequently finds itself in, it has retained a certain popularity. This rifle will never again be the American military's main combat rifle, but it will probably remain in specialty roles for the foreseeable future. Although there are other more modern rifles that use the same caliber ammunition, the rifle is still a favorite with many today. But in a nutshell, it had a short service life because of a change in military doctrine and nothing else. Well, this is Captain Max of Fun with Guns. I hope you've enjoyed this little history of the M14 rifle and why it had such a short service life, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.